Friends, you can have a seat. Can we thank this praise team again? What a wonderful job. Wow, what a gift. Before I became the pastor here at Shepherd's, I was in youth ministry for 10 years, as I hope you can tell about everything about me. And it was always so wonderful to see students grow in confidence and ability, and it's only because of really great leaders. So thank you, Michelle, so much for leading these students so very well. I'm so grateful that we get to share in their gifts and their abilities. All the musicians that you love, for the most part, learned how to play music in church. And so it takes churches like ours to say yes to kids leading. What a gift, too, that they're like really good at leading worship. That's really helpful. So I'm grateful for that. So before I begin our sermon together today, I wanted to share just something really cool what's going on?
Blinding. There's a blinding.
Oh, it's blinded by the light.
That's about it.
I can sing too, apparently. Okay, so one of the ways that we love our neighborhood is through an organization called Kids Pack. We get to participate in that this afternoon. And hey, just real quick,
Okay, there we go. It'll burn. Hold on.
It'll burn?
No, I don't know.
I hope none of y'all have ADHD because you're not following what's happening right now. I don't have ADHD if that's your thing. Yay, all right. What were we talking about? The Lord. Yeah, Kids Pack. So one of the ways that we show our neighborhood that we love them is through Kids Pack. And right around the end of last year, we received a donation from someone who's not a part of our church, but wanted to be a part of the work of our church, and asked us to make a donation in the name of our church to a few organizations. So we were able to give $5,000 to Highland City Elementary's food bank. We were able to give $3,800 to our friends down the street at First Mulberry who have a food bank. And we were able to make a $1,200 donation to Kids Pack. They sent us a letter saying thank you. And I just wanted to share with you, the church, thank you for being a generous church, and thank you for loving your neighborhood well. Can we praise God for the generosity of this church? I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of it. And you might say, well, hey, that donation is what made that possible. Yeah, that's true. But friends, let me tell you, I've been here for 5 years. When I got here 5 years ago, if we got a donation of that size and they asked us to make a donation to a food bank, I would say no, but I will make a donation to Lakeland Electric or the mortgage company. And because of the generosity of all of us, we were able to reach out in generosity and let people know of God's great love. Friends, it is nearing the end of Lent. It is Palm Sunday. And as we draw to a close in our Lenten journey of looking critically at the faith of our youth, of deconstructing and reconstructing, I want to further lead us down that path. We've talked so openly and honestly about picking up and putting down different beliefs that we might have been handed to us as children or as young adults. Shepherd's really does exist as a backstop for the faith of people that have grown up in the church, have had their church break their heart, or have just outgrown their church. And we're that backstop before that decision to worship at First Church of the Brunch, St. Mimosa's church of Sunday mornings, and we get to be that backstop, that last stop of Christian faith. And I'm so grateful that we get to do that work. But the reason why we're able to do that is because we can reconstruct a faith that is durable, inclusive, and vibrant. Today, I want us to talk about that next logical step in this journey, and that is proclamation. Everyone say proclamation. In the United Methodist Church, if you want to get ordained, there's a lot of different steps you got to go through that I've done all the steps of. And one of them, they check your theology. That makes sense. They check your personal growth, which was strange. But they also check your proclamation. And proclamation is the churchy word for your preaching, how you talk to other people. And today, when we talk about proclamation, I'm not talking about preaching. Instead, I'm talking about telling other people, sharing your heart, sharing who you are as a follower of Jesus. Because, friends, it's so important. A faith we have that we don't share with others is not a faith that we live. A faith that we have that we don't share with others is not a faith that we live. And I don't know about you, but I've gone through the motions of religion before, and I don't really want to do that any longer. I want to live my faith openly and honestly, and that will require me to share it with others. The first thing you can write in your paper notes, if that's your jam, or if you want to take digital notes, you can use our church app called Church Center, and you can type this into those notes here is this. May our lives be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. May our lives be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. Our passage today comes from Luke chapter 19. We're going to be reading verses 35 through 40. If you've got a paper Bible, you can turn there now, or otherwise you can follow along on the screen. Here at Shepherds, we have a tradition where the reader will say, this is the word of God for us, the people of God. Then all of you will say, thanks be to God, but we like to add a little extra oomph. We like to add the word woo. So everyone at the back table, make sure you're ready with your woo, all right? Also, I know you already know this, friends, but they're going to sound like kids the whole time. And this, I'm going to try so hard to be entertaining, but if they're bored, that's fine, okay? We want to make sure that the kids that we're raising now know that church is a place for them, not just a place that tolerates them. Y'all hear me? Yeah. All right, good. All right, wonderful. Let's hear from the word of the Lord, Luke chapter 19. They brought it to Jesus. It here is a baby donkey. How many of you have ever seen a baby donkey before? They've got eyelashes that go over way too far out. They look like their heads belong on a different animal. They've got tiny little hooves. I love baby donkeys, okay? That has nothing to do with the passage. I just needed to say it out loud, or that's all I was going to be thinking about, okay? So they brought the cute little baby donkey with the big eyelashes and the tiny little bows to Jesus, threw their clothes on the colt, and lifted Jesus onto it. As Jesus rode along, they spread their clothes on the road. As Jesus approached the road leading down from the Mount of Olives, the whole throng of his disciples began rejoicing. They praised God with a loud voice because of all the mighty things they had seen. They said, "Blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heavens." Some of the Pharisees from the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, scold your disciples. Tell them to stop." He answered, "I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout." This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Very good. So I have read this passage. I'm 37 years old. I've read this passage 37 times. We are really in the, if you were raised in church, you've heard this story before territory, friends. This week, and believe it or not, guys, next week, you know what we're going to talk about? The resurrection. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Easter. It's not really, I'm not going to be talking about the journey to Bethlehem. I'm not going to be talking about Ruth. We're going to be talking about the resurrection, all right? And so we're talking about the Palm Sunday story that if you were raised in church like me, you have heard before. I hope you hear it a little bit differently this week. You know, as a preacher, I get to tell some stories. I get to hopefully help it apply to your life. And when it comes to the stories that you've heard before, I try to make it as fresh and as interesting as possible. And this week, I'm actually able to see it in a new light. You see, this whole series, we've been talking about deconstruction and reconstruction. And it dawned on me as I was studying. That's what everyone that followed Jesus had already been through. You know, Jesus had this thing in Matthew chapter 5. He says, "You have heard it said, but I say unto you," right? In Matthew 5, it says, "You have heard it said that if you commit murder, you have sinned." And everyone in the crowd was like, "Whew, got it. I haven't murdered," and not to brag, but I haven't murdered one person. And they're like, "Okay, good." But then Jesus says, "But I say unto you," and they're like, "Oh no." He says, "If you have anger in your heart, you have committed murder." And they're like, "Yo, man, that's tough. I've got a pretty long rap sheet at this point, right? I've committed many murders on the drive here on my camel, right? You know, the Sunday morning, I don't know about your family, but my family, World War III happened in the car in the station wagon on the way to church. And then we got out, "Hey, so good to see you. Hey, glory, hallelujah, yeah." And, you know, that sort of thing. And so everyone that followed Jesus came there with these set of beliefs that the way to follow Jesus, or the way to follow God, was to not commit murder, to follow the high holidays, to do sacrifices. And what did Jesus say? You've heard it said, but I say unto you. And so when we, of the Christian faith, deconstruct and reconstruct our faith, sometimes we might be convinced that we're being pulled away from something new. But friends, we are doing something as original as Palm Sunday. You know, last week was such a great gift for me. I was able to go off and celebrate a wedding thanks to our friend Lee and all the wonderful staff that made Sunday happen last week. I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of that. But all throughout this Lenten journey, I've been so grateful to be here and be a part of this deconstruction and reconstruction. We've been able to pick up and put down different things. I've been reading books talking about how a faith can be lived in this modern time with a fresh understanding while still being rooted and grounded in God's great love. I know that we've got some small groups that are happening, looking at what that looks like, journeying together, because that's the most important part, that we do this journey together. Above all, we have learned that a life of faith is active. I think sometimes the Christian church, we can feel as if our faith is some sort of porcelain heirloom we've been handed, this thing we have to treat ever so delicately. Growing up, my grandmother had some porcelain swans. Why? I don't know. Some porcelain swans, and after my grandmother went to be with the Lord, they came to our house. And my mother, again, I don't know why, put them on a coffee table in our house. I was 14. I had a football. There's now one swan. To which I said, well, Mom, at least you have one left over. And she said, yeah, it was a set, which apparently is a thing. I didn't know, yeah. But we treat our faith like those swans sometimes, those delicate things we have to treat ever so gently. But what I have learned with all of you through this Lenten journey has been that our faith is supposed to be active. My prayer, friends, is that our lives, our faith, be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. So for those of you who weren't here a few weeks ago, I shared my story of when I had my faith and I lost my faith and I found it once more. And that's a process called deconstruction and reconstruction. One of the byproducts, a common byproduct of deconstruction is jadedness. Once you feel like you've figured everything out and you've got all the right answers, you can sometimes be a bit snooty, a bit jaded. I've shared with some of you, and I've shared with the worship team, that I think the last good worship song was written in 1920. I like hymns. I wasn't raised on hymns. I was raised on contemporary worship, and so I listen to worship music one day a week, and it's with y'all. It's here in this worship space, and I love being a part of that. But that's a byproduct of my deconstruction. I hear worship music, and I'm like, yeah, I remember DC Talk in 1995, They have some bangers, don't get me wrong, but I remember that sort of pain that having to listen to only Christian music provided for me. I hear Forrest Frank now, and I'm so happy for everyone that likes him, and I don't at all, and I get this. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone. Don't break my back. He broke his back. Anyways, I digress. I hear that, and I kind of feel this sense, it's like, am I better than everyone else? Am I actually right about everything? And friends, here's an important thing that I had to learn, and I hope you learn right now, is that to be right is not a fruit of the Spirit. To be right is not a fruit of the Spirit. Now, here's the thing. I have opinions about music, and they're correct. They're right. I just want you to know that I'll write them down for you, and you can just follow. You can put your life against those, and you'll be all right. But being right is not actually a fruit of the Spirit. There is not one person who was won for the gospel, brought to faith, brought to church, brought to hope, brought to life change through a clearly worded argument. No one has ever found faith and hope and love and joy because someone on the internet convinced them that they were wrong. No one has ever found community because someone who didn't like Forrest Frank told them that they were wrong and that there was something better for them. In the newly reconstructed faith, you will be given the opportunity to be right. So I deconstruct my faith, I reconstruct, and then I go to this thing called seminary, where I get a master's degree in God stuff. It's called a Master of Divinity, which is a crazy name for a piece of paper. But I get all this information, and wouldn't you know it, I'm right about everything. I have facts and figures and scholars to back me up, and it didn't make my faith more attractive. A side effect of deconstruction can be jadedness, and no one will find hope and love and peace by you being correct. When given a choice between being right and being kind, please choose kindness. When given a choice between being right and being kind, please choose kindness. And may our lives be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. So in this passage, this is an intense thing to see, but I think it's important for us to look at, is that at the beginning it says they threw their clothes on the back of the donkey. And then just a little bit later, they spread their clothes on the ground. For those keeping track at home, they took their clothes off twice. Now, I'm not just playing to the youth Sunday of it all, but they weren't naked, but they were underdressed. You ever shown up to an event that you thought was casual, but weren't, right? And you're in flip-flops and everyone else is in tuxedos, that sort of thing. That's what the disciples are going through right now. They're, instead of wearing their cloaks like they're supposed to and looking like respectable people, they are looking really out of place. One of my favorite things about being in youth ministry is some of the crazy things that middle schoolers would wear to different events. They'd come in with a big swing of a hairdo, right? Just see what happens. They'd be wearing clothes that they got out of their parents' closet or their grandparents' closet. Who knows what they're putting together? Big, big swings. It was wonderful to see. They didn't have this sense of embarrassment that adults carry sometimes. That's what these disciples in this passage are doing. You see, a reclaimed faith will require humility, to feel out of place, to be humbled, and to carry humility. I have a video that I want to show you. Some of you know, a couple weeks ago, Amanda and I, my wife and I, we got to go away and we saw a concert. We saw this band called Florence and the Machine. Me and a couple thousand of my best friends all got together in this arena. We got to watch this concert, and this is a video from my phone. I was very much a millennial. I was like, I have to get video of this. I can't wait to watch it. And you could see other people are also doing it. Everyone's singing along, and I go to watch this video. And Florence of Florence and the Machine is a wonderful vocalist, incredible musician, really great talent. Some of like what we heard this morning, that really great talent. And all I could hear was some dumb 37-year-old singing along, not hitting any note, not finding it with a flashlight. All I can hear is me screaming at the top of my lungs, out of key, while Florence is trying to do her job, right? And I look around and I realize everyone else is doing this too. I'm hearing everyone else around. I'm barely hearing, they're big speakers, and I'm barely hearing her because of how much everyone else is singing. And you know what, friends? I don't regret a thing. I'm so glad that I sang along. I'm so glad that I danced. I'm so glad that I jumped like twice. The knees, they're not what they used to be. And I regret nothing. I wonder what it will take for the church to sing along like that, right? Come on. To sing the story of Jesus, to share the hope, to proclaim the truth, to walk in love. Yesterday was Spring Fest, and we had these I'll see you tomorrow cards, and we're handing them out. And there are a couple, this is what I do. I'm pretty good at it. Some of you are here because I'm good at inviting people along. And then sometimes I'm pretty bad at it. I'm like, hey, my name's Michael. You have a church? And that's not a good hook. That's not a good hook. And then I go, well, you just come sit next. And they're stuck together. Here. And I just run away, right? I do it all awkwardly and uncomfortably, but I got a little bit humiliated a couple times. I tried my best to invite people. I did it pretty poorly. I hope they don't know my name. And yet they probably do, because that's the part that I said way too loud. But I wonder if the church would just be willing to get just a little bit humbled, to sing along, to hold up the cameras, be a bit corny, be a bit cheesy, a little saccharine. I think the world is dark and sad sometimes. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we can just live our lives so loud with the gospel that other people can hear. In this passage, it says the whole throng of his disciples began rejoicing. A throng. You ever been a part of a throng? Excuse me, that was a throng. I don't know if you've ever been a part of a throng, but it's a group of people pushed by the same idea, pointing towards something, speaking towards something, singing along. I love the idea that the biggest news story of that day in the Jerusalem Gazette was a group of people motivated, a throng of people motivated by love. I've had a lot of weird jobs, but one of them was I was the sports editor for the Lake Wales News. I was in high school. I don't know why they hired me, other than I was very much willing to work for free admission to high school football games and minimum wage, which was like a nickel and a chicken an hour. But one of the things that I learned was this old adage of, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, if you watch the news every night, you'll have heart palpitations. But also, you're not going to hear the story of a neighbor goes to a neighbor's house, and asks for a cup of sugar, and they receive it. You're not going to hear the story of someone broke down on the side of the road and someone helped them replace their flat tire. You're not going to hear about that. You're not going to hear the story of someone sneezed in a public place and someone said bless you with a smile. You're not going to hear those stories. What you're going to hear is someone asked for a cup of sugar and they got rat poison. Someone's tire popped on the side of the road and the car exploded. Someone sneezed and it was Zika virus. You know, you're going to hear the worst stories possible. If you want to hear better news, we have to tell better stories. The world that I grew up in, the evangelical Christian world, tells stories of life transformation, and I think it's time for shepherds to start telling stories. I think it's time for us to be able to tell the story of how our lives have been changed, how our faith is different, how our welcome is wide and for everyone and not just some people, to boldly tell the story of how we have been changed. It is time for us to tell stories once more. And may our lives be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. Jesus says, after the Pharisees yell at him, I tell you, if they were silent, the stones would shout. It's almost as if the story had to be told so desperately. The story is just bursting out of creation so desperately that if the people stopped talking, rocks would start talking. I'm no geologist, but one thing I know about stones is typically they're quite quiet. They're broadly speaking silent. But Jesus is saying this story is so good, so important, so necessary that the stones will start screaming if we don't tell the story. The church for the last several years has become a place, has become synonymous, has become shorthand for a litany of things that the gospel has never stood for. A grouping of political ideas, socioeconomic ideas, relational ideas, nationalistic ideas that the church is never supposed to stand for, and yet that's the story that keeps getting told again and again and again. The message of Jesus has been wrapped in a flag and changed and twisted, and I wonder if the rocks are about to cry out. I think we have a story we have to tell, or the stones will start screaming. May we be the generation that reclaims the story of Jesus worth telling. I wonder what it would look like if all of us gathered here in this space started telling a story of Jesus worth sharing. Divorced from the idea of political ideologies that twist religion to get votes, and divorced from the idea of nationalism that separates us one to another, siblings in God's family separating us, if we could reclaim that story, tell the rocks to be quiet for just a moment, I think everyone would want to hear. May our lives be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. I've got 2 action points for you this morning, 2 ways that you can take this sermon and put it into action. Like I said earlier, I don't want to just have a faith. I want to live my faith. The first one is this. I want you to invite someone to sit next to you at worship next Sunday. Y'all, this is Preacher Super Bowl next Sunday. It's Easter, right? I got a cute outfit. I'm gonna get up early to do my hair. We got a sunrise service. I'm gonna put my whole heart and soul into it, tell the same story that I've been able to tell, and I hope to tell for the rest of my life. But the real work of Easter Sunday, friends, begins when you leave this building. When you meet someone who doesn't know of God's great love, you can invite them along to be a part of the story that God is telling in all of us. You're going to invite them to come sit next to you. You're going to show up early next week. You're going to sit up close to the front so that the people that, come both Sundays every year that church happens can sit in the back. You're going to welcome them and invite them to come along with you. And then the second thing is I want you to share your story. I told you that the church has been telling stories. I want us to tell a better story. I want you to tell the story of transformation that's happened in your life since you've been here, since you've deconstructed and reconstructed. To be your pastor is to hear story after story of people whose lives are being changed. I want you to tell that story too. You can even tell it to someone that you love. I'll lower the bar for you, make it easier. You don't even have to tell a stranger. You can tell someone that you love. But tell that story of transformation, so that then our lives can be so loud with the gospel that everyone can hear. Let's pray together.